this episode of Sons of a Pitch, an American Soccer Podcast, we will bring you more team previews. In this episode, we review and get ready for the season for the Houston Dynamo, as well as the Montreal Impact, and lastly, the New England Revolution. We'll also touch on some news and signings and rumors, as well as some injury news. Stay tuned for this episode of Sons of a Pitch, an American Soccer Podcast. Hey everybody, it's Mike Guglielmi with Sons of a Pitch, an American Soccer Podcast. Back at you tonight, Friday, getting ready with another episode of season previews, getting ready for this 2020 MLS season that is a little over a month away, less than a month for those who are playing in the CONCACAF Champions League, those 5 teams. So here we are. We did an episode for you on Tuesday with 3 teams. Now we're back at you on Friday with 3 teams. Unfortunately, my co-host Nick Pateras is under the weather. He is out sick with the flu, so he is unfortunately unable to record, but it's amazing how karma comes back quick. It was just over a week ago, about 2 weeks ago now, when I was out and actually in the hospital, and he recorded the entire episode by himself. So I got you back, Nick. Hope you're feeling better soon. Thanks for covering me a few weeks ago, and rest and recuperate so we can get back at this next week with another episode of Team Previews. So let's get a shout out to those who are joining the conversation of soccer here in the United States of America on Twitter. We've got some new followers at The Bridge Pod, a Chelsea FC podcast. Interesting, a podcast all about the EPL and Chelsea, one of the biggest clubs, and they're interested in MLS. I'm guessing it's probably about that guy named Christian Pulisic. Just a guess. As well, we've got Michael Wood. Thanks for following us. Raphael at Night6MI. Also, In and Around podcast. Stroke City FC. Not Stoke City, Stroke City. Clever name. Sean Collins at Sean Collins. Octo Blue and Allison at Allison 425688858. So thank you to all of you for joining the conversation here on Twitter and getting involved with what we do every single day in growing the sport of soccer here in the United States of America. So we also just tonight, I did a Facebook and Twitter and YouTube live event. You can find it on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter as a tweet. The recorded video. So it was live. We took some questions from the fans, as well as discussed a lot of news and whatnot. So based on this episode being a team previews episode, we're probably not going to have a ton of time to talk about the news, notes, and signings. We will touch on it a little bit, some of the stuff that I saved from that, but a lot of that detailed information is going to be in that live discussion video. So go find it on YouTube. Sons of a Pitch, an American Soccer Podcast is our YouTube channel. Find that channel and subscribe so you don't miss any of the content. We're also putting up all of the team previews individually with some good graphics so you can see and hear about them. So check those out as well. Make sure you're subscribed. Turn on your notifications, that little bell, so that you get notified every time we upload a new video there. We put our podcast recordings up there, as well as our team previews. During the season, I will do picks and predictions as well for all of the games. And we're kind of dabbling with some other ideas on how to bring more content to YouTube and grow that, as well as continuing to grow our podcast. So with that being said, another way that you can support our podcast is to purchase some awesome swag on Redbubble. Check it out. Redbubble's got an app. You can find our store at the address of sonsofapitch.redbubble.com. We have 2 awesome logos for you. We have our standard, our regular logo on t-shirts, all kinds of other stuff as well. And I just finished uploading the Sons of a Pitch original logo back when we first started over a year and a half ago, when we had like 10 listeners, and 2 of them were me and Nick. Now we've grown. We've got many, many listeners, many, many viewers. We're constantly engaged in conversation about soccer, and it is absolutely awesome to see how much it's grown, and that is thanks to you, the listeners. So enough about this. Let's get right into our team previews. The first team preview that is up for tonight is going to be the Houston Dynamo. Here we are talking about the Houston Dynamo and their upcoming 2020 MLS season. I am here to preview that season on how I think it's going to go for the Houston Dynamo. Stay tuned. At the end of this little segment here, I will be announcing my predictions as of right now, January 23rd, on how I think they will end up at the end of the season. So stay tuned for that. Let's jump right in. Houston Dynamo, very busy this offseason. Lots of moves. A total of 14. 5 players in and 9 players out. We've got a big-time move. Darwin Quintero, traded from Minnesota. The Darwin Quintero, Minnesota United's first designated player, who really changed the fortunes for Minnesota once he came over and turned that club around. A great, great talent in Darwin Quintero and a huge pickup for the Houston Dynamo. Second, Zarek Valentin, a trade from Nashville. So you'll remember he was with the Portland Timbers, and then once he was with the Timbers, he got picked up by Nashville in the draft, the expansion draft, and then flipped over to the Houston Dynamo. So a nice pickup there for Houston. Also, another defender, Victor Cabrera, who was picked up in a trade from Montreal. They also picked up a homegrown player, Marcelo Palomino, and goalkeeper in a transfer from Hoffenheim, Marco Maric. Now, some of the players out. We've got DeMarcus Beasley. Yep, the legend. The USMNT legend has officially retired. He is done playing, so he will definitely be missed for the Houston Dynamo. Marlon Hairston was traded to Minnesota. Joe Willis was traded to Nashville. Romel Kyoto traded to Montreal. Eric Bird, Juan David Cabezas, Tyler Derrick, AJ De La Garza, and Kevin Garcia either had their options declined or are out of contract. So those are the players in, players out. A lot of movement for Houston. Some good players in, but also some good players out. I hate to see DeMarcus Beasley hang up the boots. It was time. He was getting older, so it's time to go enjoy some life, but he definitely had a lot of soccer left in him. He was doing extremely well for the Dynamo there on the right, and has done extremely well for U.S. soccer over the past 15, 18 years, whatever it was. Marlon Hairston also is a decent talent. Joe Willis has kind of been this steadfast goalkeeper for Houston. He's been there a long time, and he is finally moving on. And they bring in this Marco Maric, who as his replacement. So Romel Kyoto, definitely well-liked around circles in Houston. That'll be a big loss as well for them. But they've got some good players in to kind of handle that as well. So as far as designated players go, they have 2 out of the 3 designated player spots filled. There is a little bit, I do have kind of a question around it. I'm not 100% sure. Darwin Quintero is not listed as a designated player. However, he was a designated player for Minnesota. So I'm not sure if he's being bought down with TAM via Houston or what the exact details are there. But as listed on their website, I'm going to go with 2 designated players. Alberth Elise, the forward/winger from Honduras, who is just an absolute fast beast, the Black Panther. This guy is awesome, as well as Tomas Martinez, the midfielder from Argentina. So those are their 2 DPs, 2 really good quality players. And then you kind of got Darwin Quintero, who is pretty much a DP at that level, and then possibly an open spot. What will Houston do with that open spot? Will they save it for the summer? Will they bring in a signing now? Only time will tell. I assume that they'll hold it for the summer. Just kind of, they've got sort of have those 3 DPs already, so maybe they hold it for the summer and see how they're doing, and possibly flash the cash at that point to make a run towards the playoffs when they have a better idea of what they're working with. So, as far as designated players, if you have any thoughts on that, fans, make your comments known down there. Let us know in the comments section below. on YouTube, or hit us up on Twitter and let us know what you think at SOP Soccer on Twitter. And tell us, will they sign somebody in that third spot, or will they let it go? Any Houston Dynamo fans out there that kind of have the inside track, maybe hear some rumors, let us know. All right, going down the list here, we got our breakout youngsters. So this is kind of the section where we take the younger players, the homegrown players, and talk about them for a few minutes and see kind of who we think will make a good difference to their clubs. So with these, the first on the list is Marcelo Palomino. We mentioned him in the Players In section as a homegrown signing. This is a guy who played under Tab Ramos with the U20s. Really good player if you're playing for the U.S. national team in the U20s. And being familiar with the new coach is definitely a plus for him. So I expect he will get some time, get some minutes, and probably, really have a chance to shine, which I'm expecting he will. Best academy product that they had, so should be interesting. Also, we have Eric McHugh, a homegrown player from Sweden. So this one kind of intrigued me a little bit, so I started to research him a little bit. He joined the Dynamo Academy prior to the 2017-18 season and has played for the U17s, was named the U17 Player of the Year. So it's kind of interesting. He was born in Sweden, kind of grew up in Sweden, and then he played for Bangkok FC in Thailand. What? Played for the DC United Academy. Really is a very interesting story. I mean, this guy has kind of bounced around, but he does have some experience with the academies and whatnot. So I think that will bode well for him. And I think at 19 years old, I think he's got a chance to get in on that back line, especially since some of those guys have moved on from the back line, and they brought in some new guys as well. But I think he'll have a chance to really kind of break out this season. If not a breakout starter, you might get to see him, coming off the bench every once in a while when they've got the lead. So those are the two that I expect to see big things out of as far as the youngsters go. So watch out for those names, Eric McHugh as well as Marcelo Palomino. All right, so a projected 11. What do we think the lineup will look like for the Houston Dynamo come their first game at the end of February? We've got the goalkeeper, Michael Nelson. Back line of Maynor Figueroa, Alejandro Fuenmayor, Adam Lundqvist, Alad Struna. A midfield consisting of Tomas Martinez, Memo Rodriguez, Tommy McNamara. Yep, that guy. I think that MLS experience, he's going to be in that starting 11. Matias Vera. And then the forwards, Elise, Menotas, and Quintero. That right there is an extremely potent front line. When you're talking about Albert Elise, the DP, Darwin Quintero, who scored a ton of goals, as well as then you've got Menotas in the middle. Mauro Menotas has scored a lot of goals, and getting some service from Tomas Martinez. That is an extremely, extremely potent attack. I expect to see a lot of goals scored by the Houston Dynamo this season. The back line is a little bit of a rough spot. That's why I think that Eric McHugh might get some minutes. I think they're going to be a little bit short there. They did bring in Zarek Valentin and Victor Cabrera. So I think those guys might break into the starting 11. So they might replace like Lundqvist or Struna maybe. But that's even sketchy. I think those guys are a little bit older. Valentin's a little bit older. Cabrera has not been extremely a great player for Montreal in his time there. So he might kind of be one of those bench guys, veteran role models that you'll see off the bench. But overall, starting 11 of Michael Nelson or Marco Maric, the goalkeeper they just brought in. And then having Maynor Figueroa, Fuenmayor, Lundqvist, and Struna at the back line, Tomas Martinez, Memo Rodriguez, and McNamara, as well as Elise, Menotas, and Quintero. That offense is going to be good, folks. Next up, we've got the most important player. So, most important player, the way we define it, is that guy that needs to have an amazing season, needs to really step up his game and be the MVP of that club for for that club to be successful. So for Houston to be successful and kind of make a run at the playoffs and really try and make a run in the playoffs, that guy that we think is going to be the designated player, Tomas Martinez. Tomas Martinez, the main thing is, he is the number 10. He's the guy that's going to provide the service. We've watched him play multiple times. Great service, great passing ability, can score goals as well. Good off free kicks. The guy kind of has an all-around game and really needs to have that big-time season, feeding the ball to Elise down the wings, as well as, Darwin Quintero, and Mauro Manotas. If you see a lot of assists, main assists out of Tomas Martinez, if he can get probably 5 to 7 goals plus those assists, and you're talking probably close to leading the league in assists, that's going to bode extremely well for Houston. Their backline's a little suspect, so they're going to have to score a lot of goals. So Tomas Martinez is going to be extremely, extremely important to that club's success. So that's our most important player. Kind of a second to that isn't really a player, but the coach, Tab Ramos. He needs to revamp this organization. Not just coach the senior team. He needs to kind of develop the academies and bring kids in. Houston is a huge hotbed of talent for soccer. And I think that is the right guy that can bring some results not only to the first team, but also grow the game of soccer and really grow that organization, their academy, and their homegrowns, kind of with Tab Ramos' awesome experience with the U20s. I think that will bode well for him. So he's very important. He's not a player, so I couldn't make him the most important player, but he is extremely important as the head coach and really revamping this franchise and turning things around and turning this team into an MLS Cup contender. All right, so what we've all been waiting for, the predictions. Ceiling and floor, obviously with our predictions, kind of a little disclaimer here, is it is still very, very early. There can be a lot of player movement. However, look out for our actual predictions the week of February 20th. So the week before the MLS season, Nick and I will be putting our full predictions out there for every team, how we think they're going to finish in the playoffs. So we're going to number 1 through 7 in the playoffs and give you our Eastern Conference Finals, Western Conference Finals, and our pick for the MLS Cup champion. So wait for those, before you take anything with a grain of salt. But then again, even all those predictions usually end up bad. So with that, our ceiling for the Houston Dynamo, we're going to go with a low playoff seed, probably the 6th seed in the playoffs. So not quite horrible, getting, missing the playoffs as a ceiling. I think they can make the playoffs, but everything needs to go right in order for them to get into the playoffs because that Western Conference is stacked with LA Galaxy, LAFC, Minnesota kind of revamping. You have, and they still have a good core with them, as well as Seattle, Portland, San Jose is up and coming. So there's definitely some stiff competition in the West. So I'm going to go with 6th as far as ceiling goes. Now floor, I think worst in the West. Last place in the Western Conference for Houston. That is if everything goes wrong. Tomas Martinez cannot seem to pass, or they have injuries. The coach doesn't really work out. I think the floor for Houston is last place in the Western Conference. So I think personally it's going to be a rough season for the Houston Dynamo. They have a lot of offensive firepower, but that defensive line definitely needs some help, and I think that will be their undoing. So those are the ceiling and floor predictions. So that is our preview for the Houston Dynamo. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we will move on next to the Montreal Impact. Montreal Impact 2020 MLS season preview. The Impact of Montreal, Canada's representative in the CONCACAF Champions League. They will be getting started early in this season, and they've got a brand new coach. Thierry Henry, yes, the Thierry Henry, who had that long stint with the New York Red Bulls towards the end of his career, the former coach of Monaco in France, is now the head coach of the Montreal Impact. Have to talk about him as far as the offseason ins and outs. Not a ton of players in for Montreal, but the new coach is in. And now that he is in, expect to see more moves, filling out that team to look a little bit more of what he would like to see. So Thierry Henry had a rough spell with Monaco as a head coach. Did not fare very well in Ligue 1. He is a French player, was with the French national team, so that was kind of at home. I think the expectations might have been extremely high for him, as they are here in Montreal coming over to MLS, just based off of his name recognition. It'll be interesting to see how he does here in this league, coaching. It's different than Monaco, it's different than Ligue 1, but he is familiar with the travel and things like that. So it should be interesting to see how he does. I think he will do somewhat okay, but really only time will tell. But being a TFC fan, I don't think it's going to go extremely well. Now, some of the players in and players out. Players in, you've got Romel Kyoto from the Houston Dynamo. Just talked about the Dynamo in our last season preview. Romel Kyoto is a great player and will do big things in Montreal. I really like this pickup for Montreal. As well, they have Joel Waterman, who is the first transfer from the Canadian Premier League. So Joel Waterman was playing for Cavalry FC, who is one of the better teams in the CPL. So it's nice to see CPL players are finally getting recognized by MLS teams, even if it's Canadian MLS teams. It's good to see. So glad that he's made a move over to Montreal. Let's see what he can produce. I didn't really get a chance to watch many Cavalry FC games in CPL. I know that they did well, as far as they were probably one of the best teams, if not the best team throughout the season of CPL, although they lost to Hamilton in the CPL finals. So it'll be good to see him in MLS for Montreal. As well, probably the most notable signing for Montreal Impact fans this offseason is Balou Tabla. He is back from Barcelona. So there was a lot of talk. He kind of came up real quick and moved to Barcelona and was playing for Barcelona B. That did not work out. He came back and is right back in Montreal like he should be. So those are the players in. Players out. Daniel Lovitz traded to Nashville. Oh, Daniel Lovitz. Those of you who have watched or listened to our podcast, you know how we feel about Daniel Lovitz. It ain't good. So he is out on the outs over to Nashville. Victor Cabrera was traded to Houston, who we also just mentioned in that last season preview that we just did. Goalkeeper Jason Bolo had his option declined. Omar Brownie, option declined, sent back to Panama. Daniel Kanumbe, Ken Krolucki, Thomas Muller-Jaguar, Jason Vargas, and Bakary Sagna. Yes, Bakary Sagna. That Bakary Sagna was out of contract. The rest of them had their options declined. Surprising name on this list, Jason Vargas. Really came into the league as a touted signing. Never really worked out to much. A waste of talent, really, in MLS. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up in his career. First game for Montreal Impact, we mentioned this in the beginning, was the CCL game at Saprissa on February 19th. So Thierry Henry's first game will actually be in Costa Rica at Saprissa. It's going to be very interesting to see how he reacts to CONCACAF, because anybody who has paid attention to United States soccer or CONCACAF knows it's a different beast down there, and it's going to be interesting to see how he rallies his troops in that belly of the beast, so to say, at that nice stadium that they have down there at Saprissa. Now let's talk a little bit about the designated players. When you're thinking the Montreal Impact, who else but Ignacio Piatti? That is the guy. When you think of the Impact, you think of the Nacho Man, Ignacio Piatti, every single time. So he is their number one designated player. The other designated player for Montreal is going to be Safir Taider. He came over from Bologna. He had played for Inter Milan, an Algerian international, has played at some pretty big clubs throughout his career, and has done well for Montreal since he's come over, but I think there is more room for him to improve. The third spot is open. They do not have a third DP as of right this moment. It'd be interesting to see if they go for a signing now in the preseason before the season starts, or if they're going to wait till the summer. My guess is they will wait till the summer, just because it's a new coach. He's got enough on his plate right now, getting used to this new team that he has, and really trying to come up with a game plan with those guys, and then kind of see where those needs might be, and go after somebody in the summer, which we all know it is much easier to get a player cheaper and easier to get a player in the summer. There are downsides to that. They come into the MLS season in the middle of the season, and it's hard for them to. There's an adjustment period in MLS. We all know it. As well, you get these guys who just played an entire season. So they've been playing for 9, 10, 11 months, and then they get thrown right back into the fire to finish out an MLS season and get ready for a playoff push. So my guess is they'll wait till the summer to fill that last DP spot. Breakout youngsters. So there's two guys here that I really think have a chance to be breakout youngsters. One is who we mentioned, Balou Tabla. This kid's got mad talent. He's got a lot of potential. I mean, he was signed by Barcelona. That tells you enough right there. If Barcelona is willing to sign an 18, 19-year-old kid, or even younger, he might even be younger than that, there's definitely potential there. There's definitely talent there. So I'm hoping that I think he will get the minutes with this roster for Montreal, because it's not a crazy good roster, and I'll get into that with my projected starting 11 here in a few minutes. But I think there's an opportunity for him to get minutes and really start to grow in MLS and break out. That's what he needs to grow his career. And as long as it's managed the correct way, I touched on it in our live video that we did earlier, speaking about kind of the new way of growing the young talent in MLS. It's no longer being 15, 16 years old and getting shipped over to Europe to go get loaned out to another side to then be, just put on a bench somewhere. It's about growing inside MLS, USL, getting into that first team, breaking into that first team, where I really think Balou Tabla can do here for Montreal. And then, who knows, maybe in a year or two from now, he could end up being a star in MLS and move on to Barcelona and really start playing well. The second is Clement Bahia. He's a midfielder. The only question here is, will he get playing time? He's a homegrown kid, a Frenchman. I think you're going to see some youth coming from Thierry Henry. He'll give the youth some time and some minutes, and I think he has a shot at becoming a breakout player. Now let's talk a little bit about the projected 11. So the projected 11, the way that I broke it down was to use the last formation that these teams used at the end of the 2019 season. So the last formation that Montreal used, and this obviously could change with a new coach, was a 4-2-3-1. So starting goaltender, there is a bit of a competition here. You usually don't see much competition between goalkeepers in MLS. It might be 2 or 3 going into the season, but here it's Clement Diop. I think will be the starter over Evan Bush. I think Evan Bush's time has come and gone. He was left unprotected for the expansion draft, however, did not get picked up. So I think you'll see some competition there, but I do expect Diop to win the job and be the starter come opening day. Corrales, Camacho, Fanny, and Raitala on defense. A note here that I have is that they need some serious help on defense. Those 4 aren't bad. Corrales, we do know, is a rough, is not a great player. See his Chicago Fire days. But the rest of it's not a horrible back line. Fanny is getting a little old. His option wasn't picked up, but he ended up coming back in. They signed him to a new deal because they are so thin at the back. They have 0 depth back there. So watch out. If there's any injuries at the back, it's going to spell a lot of trouble, and I really think they could use an upgrade there. Now, the midfield, very decent midfield. So you got you got Sam Piet, Saphir Taider, And then the three portions, so kind of your offensive or more wingers, you've got Kyoto, Piatti, and Bohan, with the lone striker up top being Maxi Urruti. So that's the starting 11 that I've got. I expect them to score some goals with that. It depends on if Taider can be better than he has been in the past, what kind of impact Romel Kyoto has as well, and Ignacio Piatti. Is he starting to come down a little bit? There's been some rumors that he's looking to go back to Argentina, to go home and kind of finish out his career down there because he doesn't have a lot of time left. He is getting older. Will he regress? Will he not? I think if he really can't. If he does, Montreal's in trouble. And Bohan is older. He does have a lot of good experience, but he's older. Maxi Urruti's just kind of bounced around MLS for the past 6-7 years and has done well. But he's not a superstar. He's not going to light the league on fire. So there's a lot of room to grow for Montreal. So Montreal fans, what do you think? Do you think the starting 11 is kind of what we'll see come opening day in CCL? Or do you think that we're going to have a lot of signings coming in, a lot of depth pieces added? Let us know in the comments below on YouTube, as well as let us know on Twitter or on our website, www.sonsofapitchsoccer.com. So, most important player to me, I really had a big debate between the two designated players with Piatti as well as Safir Taider. However, with Piatti getting up there in age, I think it falls onto Safir Taider to kind of lead that role and be the most important player on this squad. He's younger, although he's not young anymore. He needs to be better than Piatti. He has to be the most important player for this squad and take those reins from Piatti and kind of let Piatti ease up a little bit as far as the pressure goes. And maybe that'll help with his results. If he can do that, I think they have a slight shot at making the playoffs. This is a long-term goal right now for Montreal. So getting into predictions of ceiling and floor. I think the ceiling is going to be a 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. That's an away playoff game. That is best case scenario. Piatti does not regress. He gets better. Safir Taider is the most important player, gets better. Diop is just unbelievable in net. They pick up a couple big signings on the back line to replace Fanny and Camacho or Corrales, and they bring in a lot of depth. Balou Tabla breaks out. I mean, you're talking about a huge increase in talent on these guys from what we've seen from them in the past. If that's the case, I think they'll make the playoffs and get an away seed. As far as floor goes, it could be dead last. It's going to take time. It is a long-term project, as I mentioned. Having a brand new coach, you're moving a lot of new pieces into this team, or at least we'll see that coming into the season. You've got the CCL competition, which always has definitely put a strain on teams. Montreal against Saprissa, that is a winnable first-round matchup for them. I don't think they will personally, but there is a chance they could win it, and that could put some extra strain on that lineup. So I could see them finishing dead last in the East. Everything kind of goes wrong, and Thierry Henry's first year is kind of a rebuilding year. Piatti moves on in the summertime. They sell him over back to Argentina for $300,000 because he's getting so old. That's kind of that's the ceiling and the floor. So ceiling 5th in the East, get that away playoff game, and floor is dead last. Those are the predictions for the Montreal Impact, and that's pretty much our team preview for Montreal. So on our podcast, we've got a quick break to hear from our sponsors, Donovan Food Brokerage, as well as Nice Premium Iceland Pure Spring Water. Thank you for sponsoring our podcast. We'll be right back after this short break to bring you our next team preview, that of the New England Revolution. We are back with the New England Revolution team preview, the third and final preview of this podcast episode. New England Revolution, a big turnaround last season under new coach at the time, Bruce Arena. Yes, the U.S. national team legend Bruce Arena. He really turned things around after another USMNT player of Brad Friedel was let go. It was a rough start for the Revs back last season, and then Bruce Arena came in, they brought a couple signings in, and things turned around. Are things going to continue on the uptrend this season? Only time will tell. Make sure to stick around for the end of our preview here. We will give you our ceiling and floor and let you know what we think our predictions will be for the Revs. So, off seasons, ins and outs. A lot of movement from the New England Revolution. Some of the players in: defender Alex Butner, on a free midfielder Damian Rivera, a homegrown player. Kellen Rowe. Yes, Kellen Rowe is back in New England. I think that's where he played his best soccer when he was a member of the Revs. He got moved around a little bit. He's been kind of all over the board. He was sporting Kansas City. He's back where he should be. Kellen Rowe is a great talent. I think he will really be able to help this Revs team out back in New England. Also, defender Seth Sinovic, a free agent they picked up who was with Sporting Kansas City. I think that's another solid free agent signing. Also, their big signing, Adam Buska from Poland, transfer from Pogoń Szczecin. As well, Samba Kamara, a defender, and defender Henry Kessler from the Super Draft. Players out. Janil Anibaba was picked up in the expansion draft. Juan Aguadillo was option declined and was picked up in the re-entry draft by Toronto FC, and then could not come to terms with TFC and signed with Miami. So if you look at Janil Anibaba got picked up in the expansion draft, kind of Aguadillo got picked up in the expansion draft, even though technically he did not. Forward Juan Fernando Caicedo, his option was declined. Edgar Castillo, Michael Macien, Brian Wright, all had their options declined. Goalkeeper Cody Cropper is out of contract, and midfielder Zachary Harrivel. A lot of movement for New England. I really, really like their signings, the guys they've brought in. Alex Butner looks to be a strong signing. As well, you've got Kellen Rowe, Seth Sinovic, two MLS veterans. Kellen Rowe, as I mentioned before, he started in New England. That's where he played his best soccer. So it's good to see him back. I think he will do big things for them. Seth Sinovic is also a solid defender, a solid player to keep on their back line. Expect big things from some of these new players. Adam Buska, don't really know a lot about him, but I expect he will. He's a DP signing, and they have hit the ball out of the park on their previous DP signings. So it should be interesting. Let's now, talking about those DPs, let's get into it. There are three designated players. They have all three filled. First up, Carlos Gil, one of the better players. Kind of finished, I believe he finished in the MVP voting last season for MLS MVP. Carlos Gil is an extremely talented midfielder, distributor. He can score goals, has really hit his stride well, and was pretty much an unknown coming into the league. Gustavo Bo was transferred in from Tijuana last year, and he matched up with Carlos Gil, and they tore the league apart. These guys played extremely well together. They complement extremely well together, and the chemistry is definitely there. So two really solid DPs. Now the third, Adam Buska. This one is interesting because he came over from Poland. I don't know a ton about him, but he is a strong signing for the Revs, because you know what, until they prove me wrong and sign somebody bad, this management group, I'm going to go and give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's probably going to be a pretty solid signing. So as far as Buska, he played last season. He had 18 matches in the Polish league, 7 goals and 3 assists. Not a great number over there, but not bad. He is very young. He's 23 years old. That's pretty. That's probably the most important number here, is the fact that he's younger. So you put Adam Buska and Gustavo Bo up top, getting fed by Carlos Gil. That is going to be a very potent offense. That, I think, is kind of the magic formula in MLS for designated players. We've seen, DPs as defenders doesn't really work out well. We've seen DPs as goalkeepers. That never works out well. And then, you kind of need midfielders and really attacking mids with strikers. If you pair them up like that and have your DPs be strikers and attacking mids, that's how you get the best bang for your buck in MLS with those DPs. So those three, I think they've got the right formula there, and should be fun to watch for New England. Now, as far as breakout youngsters, Justin Rennicks. This is a guy, youth national team player for the U.S. He scored a big goal. I can't remember exactly who it was against, but that was kind of what got his name out there. He scored that decent, it was really like a game winner in stoppage time to put them into a qualifying tournament or something to that nature. So he is one to watch. I think he, being a youth player, Bruce Arena with his ties to the national team, I think he likes that youth, and you'll see him get some time there in New England. Another of the breakout youngsters is going to be Tajon Buchanan. Here's a guy, a Generation Adidas player that could make waves for New England. He started out with I believe he was with Syracuse, who's a strong college program, as well as came from Canada. He's a Canadian player. So I think we'll see him do some from the hotbed of Brampton, Ontario. Who there's a lot of good young talent coming out of Brampton. The fact that he's GA, a lot of these Generation Adidas type players, their first year they kind of hang out and get some experience. Second, they're the second season they start to break out a little bit, and by the third they're fighting for a bigger and better contract. So expect to see big things out of Tajon Buchanan and Justin Rennicks. So those are the breakout youngsters for the New England Revolution. Now let's get into their projected starting 11. So again, as I've mentioned in the previous team preview episodes, the way I go about these is by going with the previous formation that they used in their last game of the season. The last formation used by Bruce Arena and the New England Revolution was a 4-4-2. So they're my best guess here to their starting 11. There's a lot of competition in this lineup. Is going to be Matt Turner. And then you've got Brandon Bye, Delamea, Farrell, and Butner across the back. As far as your midfield goes, I'm going to go with the midfielder Luis Caicedo, who's a Colombian, 23-year-old Colombian that seems to be not quite a breakout youngster, but an international signing. I expect him to get some minutes and break into that midfield over a Scott Caldwell type that's kind of been there in the past. As well, Kellen Rowe, Carlos Gil, and Pinilla with Busca and Bo up top. That's kind of what I think they'll go with. A solid back line. Delamea and Farrell are two very big, strong center backs, so I expect to see a lot of good defending out of them and not a ton of goals scored against them. Matt Turner, some question marks there as far as goalkeeper goes. Definitely could use an upgrade there, I think. But that's not, in MLS, goalkeepers are kind of a dime a dozen. You don't need a big name guy. Some of these kind of journeymen have proven to do well over time. So most important player for the New England Revolution this season, I think the most important player, this is a tough one, because last season they both had such a strong season. You had Carlos Gil, and I think it really comes down to between the two, Carlos Gil and Gustavo Bo. Bo had an extremely strong finish to his season. I think the most important player has to go to Carlos Gil. He's kind of that maestro in the midfield that not only is he going to score goals, but he definitely has to be able to provide the service to those two DP strikers in Bo and Busca. So I wanted to go with Bo, but really if he doesn't get the service from Carlos Gil, he's not going to be the most important player. So really, he has to be the most important player, and Carlos Gil has to be the most important player to make sure that the Revs are successful and continue this upward trend that they've had, starting with the middle of last season once Bruce Arena came in, and pretty much even a few games before he came in, as soon as they got rid of Brad Friedel. So look out for big things from Carlos Gil. Fans, let us know, who do you think the most important player is for the Revs? This is a team who I think a lot of the pundits are expecting big things from. Do you expect somebody other than Carlos Gil to be the most important player? Make your case and let us know at SOP Soccer on Twitter or through YouTube here in the comments. Make sure you subscribe and like our content. We're bringing lots of good content to YouTube here. Every single team preview will be posted up to YouTube, as well as during the season picks, predictions, and many more videos of awesome content. So make sure to subscribe. It really helps us out. Now, getting into the predictions. So again, there's a little bit of a disclaimer here. Watch out for our predictions the last week before the season starts. So the week of February 20th, once CCL kicks off, we'll be putting our predictions down on paper, myself and my co-host Nick. So look out for those then. Right now, we're kind of doing a little bit of a preliminary with what we've got now, what we're working with now. And a lot can change throughout the league in this next 4 to 5 weeks. So with that being said, our ceiling for the New England Revolution is going to be third in the Eastern Conference. I think I've heard from others. They, one of our listeners, I was having a conversation with him the other day, and he's thinking that they could end up being the best team in the Eastern Conference. He's that hyped about the New England Revolution. I personally don't see him going all the way up to the top seed in the East. It could happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. My ceiling for them is going to be third place in the East, getting at minimum of one home game in the playoffs, and possibly even two. There's a good chance there could be two with the new single game formation. As far as floor goes, I think the worst case scenario, if all goes bad for New England, is the 8th spot in the Eastern Conference and just barely, painfully missing out on the playoffs. I think this team is almost a firm playoff lock to me, but it's close. There is that slight chance. I'd probably put it about 10% chance that they could hit their floor and end up being towards the bottom half of those playoff teams and fighting for a spot and just missing out. So there's my predictions for the New England Revolution for our team preview here. Let us know if there's any other information you want to hear about with New England Revolution. We will be talking about them, I am sure, going forward this season. Expect big things from them. So thanks for joining us for our team previews. Next up on the podcast, we will be talking about some news and notes to finish out this episode. All right, fans, we're back for the last segment of this episode. I did want to get a few news and notes and signings and some other information, listener interactions that we've had over the past few days into this podcast episode. So let's get right into that, as time is of the essence. We've done about 45 to 50 minutes so far of the team previews. Here we are. I've got the first news and notes is going to be, we did discuss a lot of these news and notes on our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube live event earlier on Thursday night. So go back through the archives to find that. Mike was talking a lot about some of that news, TFC and some of their homegrown signings, as well as the Michael Bradley injury, Chicharito, as well as some Chicago Fire news and notes. So check that out. Make sure to find it on YouTube. We're definitely trying to grow our YouTube channel. So listeners, we appreciate you lending us your ears. Lend us your eyes as well on YouTube. It'd be much appreciated. Find our channel, Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell, and you will get notified every time Mike and Nick put up a video on YouTube. So let us get into this. First thing first is a listener question from David Ruffin, at David Ruffin on Twitter. He had mentioned, what is, in your opinion, the most telling of the championships, so to say? A supporter shield, like winning the league, or winning MLS Cup. So here you go, David. In my personal opinion, and I can't wait to hear Nick's opinion next week when he's back, my opinion is it's the Supporter Shield. I think that's the most important. Yes, here in the United States, it's all about the playoffs, right? Everything. NFL is about the playoffs. You got the Super Bowl champion, World Series champion. There's no regular season champion. In hockey, yeah, there's a President's Trophy, but it's all about the Stanley Cup. Who can make that run in the playoffs? Soccer is a different beast. Throughout the world, the most important winning title is the league title, and that is based off of points throughout the regular season, which is the Supporter Shield in MLS. So in my personal opinion, I think the Supporter Shield is the most important. That shows that you are the best team from start to finish over the 15, 20, 30, or in MLS cases, 34 match season. You were the most dominant piece. Any team can get hot. Look at Toronto FC. They didn't win it last year, but they came close. So my Toronto FC, were they the best team in MLS last year? Absolutely not. Were they the second best team in MLS last year? No, not even close. They got hot at the right time and made a run and almost won MLS Cup. Now, Seattle, they had a strong season. They were pretty consistent throughout and did win, but I think the Supporter Shield is that best teller of who is the best team, and that's the most important prize for me, in my opinion. So, Nick will get to that question next week on the episode, probably dropping on Tuesday when we do some more team previews. But thanks for that question, David. Really appreciate it. That's my opinion on that one. Another listener interaction that we had this week was Mike Kleeman out of San Jose. Mike Kleeman has been a huge supporter of our podcast, and mentioned that he had purchased some Sons of a Pitch swag, a drawstring bag. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Thank you for helping us grow the game of soccer here in the United States, and thanks for picking up that awesome swag. Now, it's time to get that old logo, buy something with that old logo on there, and so you can rep the original throwback of Sons of a Pitch. So Mike Kleeman had sent us some information about San Jose, that he is one of the very few supporters of the general manager in San Jose, who really takes a lot of garbage and a lot of crap from the fans. Now, he says that he's been granted a little bit extra access to him, along with a few of the other season ticket holders, probably because he's quite positive about this guy when a lot of fans aren't. Mike says, in his opinion, I don't think there's another GM in MLS that has done as well as he has with as little money from ownership. I completely agree with Mike's statement there. That's a squad, a low-budget squad. They don't spend a ton of money. And to be able to bring Almeida in and to be able to, have the slight success that they've had recently, clinching that playoff spot in the last day of with this decision day a couple of years ago, and fighting for a playoff spot last year and rebuilding year, they've done extremely well. So a couple little bit of information that Mike sent over was there's one signing that they're looking to do before the season starts, and that's another center back. So San Jose fans, look out for a signing of a center back. There's apparently two of them right now, and the coach Almeida wants it done before Sunday, before the team travels to Cancun. So hopefully we'll see a signing very shortly from San Jose, especially a center back to help bolster that back line. Also, the striker competition is going to come down to Wando, Huson, and Andy Rios. My personal opinion, and I'll get into this a little bit further on the team preview that will most likely be dropping next week. Look out for that, Mike, and other San Jose fans, especially since you let us know that you purchased some swag. That automatically moves your team up in the rankings there for getting your season preview done earlier. So we'll be doing that next week, and I agree. I think it'll be Wando and Husons, which is two strong strikers. I mean, Wando's kind of had a resurgence, so I expect him to continue that at least, score a few goals. He's not going to light the league on fire, but get a few. Also, got Christian Espinoza on loan last year and negotiated a transfer fee of $2.5 million to keep him in San Jose, which is the record transfer fee for the club. And you know what? I like Christian Espinoza. I think he's a good player. Mike states, he's not, a big name. He's not, going to get a ton of exposure, but he's better than what his stats show. And I have to agree with Mike on that. Also, look for some big things from Jackson Ueel. This guy, apparently he got really vocal in the locker room last year, and everybody was like shocked because this kid's kind of a quiet kid. And Matias Almeida went up to him afterwards and was like, I love it, I want more of it, and seems to have a great relationship with Jackson Ueel, and really expects more from him this season. So expect to see him get lots of time and lots of play time and minutes. So Mike, thank you for that insight into San Jose. Really appreciate it. These are the type of things. So listeners, if you guys are in your markets, you have a lot of more of inside information than we do. We have to follow 30 teams. When you throw in some of the USL stuff that we follow as well, and some of these players, 26 teams. So look, we can't do it all. We have wives and kids we have to focus on as well. So we appreciate all the feedback that you guys give us. So definitely keep it up. So really appreciate that, Mike. Also, a few other things I want to touch on before we finish up this episode here is LAFC win TIFO of the year. So Independent Supporters Council had their TIFO of the year. It was the Michael Jackson TIFO for 3252. Good on LAFC and 3252 for winning that award, just because they have a very, very strong supporters section. That place is always bumping and rocking. So definitely a shout out to that. Another thing is the Nashville jersey reveal. I like the event. There was a lot of hype around it. It was a good turnout. However, I think the jersey is a little bland. They're saying gold. I want to see it in real life before I really judge it. But it doesn't look gold to me. It looks yellow. It looks like a plain Columbus Crew jersey. Not quite as yellow as Columbus Crew, but close. And I'm not impressed by it. I think that the jerseys in and of themselves are probably a little bit underwhelming. You're not getting a ton of good stuff from Adidas this year. It seems like a lot of the away kits are going to have those 3 stripes on the shoulder, and they're kind of making them all the same, and I don't like that. Also, some other news from the expansion sides. Inter Miami has stated that they expect to see about 5 or 6 more signings before the season is through. So expect to see some signings from Inter Miami here very shortly. They've got to bolster up, especially they need another DP. They've only got the one young kid from Argentina, so expect to see at least one more DP before the season starts from Inter Miami, since they're already talking about winning the Champions League next season, and all they're going to do is win, no matter what. So Austin FC as well, season ticket wait list for them already. Maybe the former Columbus Crew owner was onto something with this Austin market. Seems to have a very, very strong season ticket base. They're going to be selling that stadium out whenever they do get into it, however big it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be a very big stadium, but obviously the ticket sales are going extremely well there. So that's kind of your expansion update. I'm going to wrap this episode up. I am tired of talking to myself. Hopefully Nick will be feeling better and back to recording next week when we get started for another episode of Team Previews. Thank you, listeners, for lending us your ears and eyes, watching us on YouTube. We appreciate your time. And sponsors, thank you for sponsoring us and letting us do what we do every single week and helping us continue to grow. Talk to you guys very, very soon. Have a great weekend, and talk to you next week.